Ashley Groot, who is the Director of Curriculum at Havant and South Downs College. Just before I go through the final bits of information to do with the webinar today with you and hand over to Ashley, I'd just like to check that everyone tuning in is able to hear okay. So we'll just do a quick sound check. If you are able to hear and the audio is fine for you at the moment, could you please type yes into the questions and comments box that you should have on the screen? I'll give just a moment for you to do that. It would be really great if you can just let me know that you're able to hear. Thank you. Lots of responses are coming through and all showing that the audio is fine, which is great. So just a very quick bit of information, first of all. My name's Nadia Morad and I'm a project leader for the Southern Universities Network, or the SUN for short. For those of you who aren't familiar with the SUN, I will give you just a little bit of background information so that you can see where the webinar that you're tuning into today fits within our overall programme and work. So the SUN is a partnership of 6 universities in the south, and it forms part of the National Collaborative Outreach Programme, which some of you tuning in today may well be quite familiar with. One of the central aims and objectives of our work is to increase young people's participation and progression onto higher education of any form at all. And the webinar programme forms part of the staff and teacher and advisor element of our programme. So although a lot of our work is outreach activity directed at the young people themselves, the webinar programme forms part of the teacher element of it in order to upskill staff so that they're able to use the information gained from these sessions to support and inform and advise the young people that they work with. So we've got a really, really broad range of people tuning into the webinar today from all sorts of different schools, colleges, higher education establishments, which is really fantastic. And thank you very much, I should say at this point, for giving up part of your evening and tuning in. We really do appreciate the support for the webinar programme. So we hope that you find the information useful today. The format for the webinar is we're going to start in just a moment where I hand over to Ashley to deliver the presentation. We should be finished by 5 p.m. at the very latest. It may be before that, but I can assure you that we won't be going beyond the scheduled time, which is hopefully good news. It will be recorded, so we record all of our webinars in the hopes that any colleagues who weren't able to tune in today might be able to watch it at a later stage, or you may well be able to share the link with them, which would be great. In just a moment, I'll hand over to Ashley. At that point, you should be able to see Ashley's presentation on the screen. It will be a PowerPoint presentation that Ashley will talk you through step by step. As Ashley's presenting, if you find you've got any questions related to anything that Ashley's presenting on, feel free just to type those questions into the questions box as we're going. Alternatively, if you want to type a question at the end of the presentation, that's absolutely fine. So you can do either of those two things, and regardless of when the question is typed, we'll come to all questions at the end of the presentation. So at that point, I would summarise the questions over to Ashley. And then if I can ask you, wherever possible, if you can stay to the very end of the webinar, that would be great, because we really, really appreciate your feedback via a couple of very short evaluation questions at the end. It's just 3 multiple choice questions. So if you could stay to that point, that would be really, really appreciated. Okay, without any further ado, I will hand over to Ashley. We just need to switch presenters at this point, so please bear with us if the line goes a little bit shaky just for a moment. That does sometimes happen, but I will hand over to Ashley, and at that point you should be able to see Ashley's PowerPoint. Okay, thank you again.
Okay, so hello everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. So as Nadia said, I'm Ashley Groot. I'm a Director of Curriculum at Hamilton South Downs College, and I'm our college lead on T-Levels. So I'm just going to talk you through some general information about T-Levels, and hopefully this will be really useful and beneficial to you. So first of all, this is some of the latest T-level promotional information that's come out from the Department for Education. So this is just one of the logos that they're using at the moment. There's a couple of videos that are embedded into this presentation that unfortunately we're not able to show because it doesn't allow us to provide the sound. But I understand that Nadia is going to send these out, and then you'll be able to watch these in your own time. The first video is the promotional video that's been launched by the DfE as part of the national campaign. So it's about a minute long. It's quite a catchy video. And then the video at the end is students that have actually gone on industrial placements in the last academic year and how they found those placements and the benefits they felt that those placements were able to bring. So first of all, why are T-levels happening? So many of you may be aware of the Sainsbury Report that came out in April of 2016. And the Sainsbury Report made a number of recommendations. So firstly, that students were prepared for an occupation rather than a sector. And any of you that work in further education will know that some of the level 3 qualifications we offer are quite broad. They don't actually prepare students for a particular sector and for working in a particular occupation. Another recommendation was a reduction in the number of the level 3 qualifications that are on offer, and I think it's over 6,000 currently exist. So obviously very, very complicated for employers, for parents, for students to understand the value of all these different qualifications and what they should be studying. And also another recommendation was that there should be a reduction in the number of awarding bodies. So I think there are over 150 different awarding bodies currently. And I don't know if you're aware, but one of the drives of the T-levels is awarding bodies have had to tender to be the only awarding body that provides that particular T-level. So on the back of the Sainsbury Report, there was also the recommendation that there should be 15 technical routes that would allow students to develop the relevant skills so they could move into skilled employment. And then from the Sainsbury Report, the response from the government was the skills plan, which came out in July 2016. And that basically took on board all of these recommendations that the Sainsbury Report made. And that's where T-levels were born. So this is a slide that's come from the Department for Education. So the plan is in the next few years, when students leave school, they will move into one of two routes. So the route on the left-hand side is the academic route. So that's the students moving on to study A-levels. And then from there, they'd potentially move on to higher education. And the route on the right-hand side is the technical route. So students would move on to study technical qualifications, and you can see there either college-based technical education, so that would be the T-levels, or apprenticeships. And then from there, students would then move potentially either directly into employment, onto higher education, but the more technical degrees, or degree apprenticeships and higher apprenticeships. Couple of interesting points to note here. So in theory, students should be able to move between the two pathways. So they should be able to move from academic to technical and the other way. And the transition year that you can see is what the year that will be in place to prepare students for the next step. So that would be usually what we would offer at level 2 in colleges. So what are T-levels? So they're only at level 3, so they're 2-year qualifications that are delivered at level 3. There are 15 different routes, and I'll show you the different routes in a minute. And then from each of those routes, there's different pathways and what we call occupational specialisms. They're equivalent to 3 A-levels. So they're equivalent to 3 A-levels in terms of UCAS points. They're slightly larger in terms of actual delivery hours. So at the moment, an A-level would be around about 140, 150 hours of delivery. So 3 A-levels, maybe about 450 hours that students would study. The T-levels, the 3 that are coming in 2020, they are all at the moment 650 hours of teaching. So guided learning hours, 650. That's without the industrial placement, which I'll explain about in a little while. So they're a combination of classroom theory, practical learning, and a minimum of 315 hours industrial placement. So this is the big challenge for us in terms of further education, because students have to complete a minimum of 315 hours out in industry working with employer. And if they don't complete those hours, they don't pass the qualification, so they won't get the certificate at the end of the 2 years. There's a real focus on development of skills for employment, and potentially then students can move either directly into employment, onto higher apprenticeships, or onto HE programs. Okay. So these are the 15 different routes that are available on the T-levels, and don't worry too much about the little bits of wording that are coming off of each of the routes. They are just suggested career paths that students could go into from studying those routes. A couple of interesting points to note. The health and social care that we offer at the moment has been split. So you can see health on this screen now sits with science, and social care sits separately. A couple of other interesting points. So there's no sport. My background's sport, and initially I was quite concerned about that. The reason for it apparently is because the Department for Education have said they've only developed T-levels in areas where students need technical skills to be able to go on into employment. I'd maybe argue the case for being a sports coach or a personal trainer or something like that, but that's their decision. And then there's also no T-level for performing arts, as you can see. And another interesting point is the 4 at the bottom here: protective services, sales, marketing and procurement, social care, and transport and logistics will be delivered through apprenticeships only. So we won't offer those qualifications and T-levels in college in that delivery method. So they'd be run through apprenticeships. Bear with me a second. So when is this happening? So wave 1, which is September of next year, we have 3 T-levels that are coming. So education, and we will be delivering the early years pathway of that at the South Downs and the Alton campuses here at Havant and South Downs College. There's also construction, but this is the white collar construction. So the sort of management side of construction, so design, surveying and planning. So that's quantity surveying, architecture. And then the digital that's coming in wave 1 is production design and development. So that's web design, web development, programming, that sort of thing. So they are the first 3 that are coming in 2020. Then in 2021, we have wave 2. So you can see there are a number of other qualifications coming in 2021. So health and science, of which there are 3 different T-levels. So there's health, healthcare science and science. For digital, there's support and services and business services. And then for construction, there's 2 different T-levels coming in 2021. So that's the on-site and building services. Just an interesting point to note that for each of these T-levels that are coming, there are a number of occupational specialisms. So for example, with the healthcare science, there are a number of options that students can take. So there are different nursing pathways, there's dentistry, there's ophthalmology, pharmaceutical science. So there are a number of different occupational specialisms that colleges can select to deliver. Sorry, and other providers, not just colleges, that can select to deliver. So the next wave is wave 3 in 2022, and I won't read them all out to you, but you can see there. So there's each of those are separate T levels. So there's a T level in legal, there's a T level in finance, and a T level in accountancy, and so on and so forth. And then, and then in 2023, the final T levels that will be coming will be wave 4, and they will be in these subjects. So again, each of those titles are separate T levels. So there'll be an animal care and management T level, an agriculture, land management and production T level, and so on and so forth. So you can see these are gradually being phased in, and the Department for Education have said that where there's crossover with current level 3 qualifications that cross over with these T levels, that they in theory will no longer exist for funding. Now, whether that is the case and whether that happens, we are yet to see, but that is the initial plan from the Department for Education. So what does a T level look like? So there are 5 key components to a T level. So component 1 here you can see is the core content. So this is the underpinning knowledge that will be required to work in that sector. So for example, in construction, it might be the health and safety aspects that are required around working on a construction site. Whereas the component 2 is the occupational specialism, and that is specifically preparing students for an occupation within that sector. So you can, so an example might be with the construction, on-site construction T level, that might be bricklaying or plumbing or electrician. So they're very specific to a job role, the occupational specialisms. Component 3, like I said, is the industrial placement, and that has to be a minimum of 315 hours. And there are a number of things that colleges have to do while the students are on placement. So students have to have a minimum of 3 visits. They need to be set objectives to achieve on the placement. And then also, it's a pass-fail. So also part of that, students have to complete a project on the placement. And I'll give you a little bit more information about that in a minute. Component 4, maths, English and digital. So to pass the T level, a student has to complete either functional skills level 2 in English and maths, or a GCSE grade 4 or above by the end of the programme to get the certificate for the T level. So again, if they haven't got those maths and English requirements by the end of the programme, they wouldn't achieve the T level and get the T level certificate. There are some T level qualifications that may be required by the T level panels that have written them to have more English and maths and digital requirements. So an example for that might be that on an engineering T level, they might require the students to have core maths at level 3. So we're waiting to see what the finalised content will be for some of the T levels to see whether there be any extra requirements around the English, maths and digital. And then component 5 is any other requirements set by the T level panel. So the example that we've been given is maybe with the catering and hospitality T level, that students will also be required to have their food hygiene certificate at the end of the programme, so they can then go out and work in industry. So a bit more information about the content. So the core content can be up to 50% of the total qualification time. It's externally assessed, so there'll be exams to assess this, and that's graded A star to E. The occupational specialism could be as much as 50% of the qualification time, so could be larger than the core content. That's assessed through synoptic assessment, and that will be graded pass merit distinction. The industrial placement, like I said, a minimum of 315 up to 400 hours placement, and the students have to complete a project. The project will be something that is set in tandem with the employer. So there'll be a list of projects that the employer can choose from in partnership with the college and the student, and then they then do that. The student does that directly through the awarding body, so the college doesn't really have much to do with that. Students do it online through the awarding body and submit it directly to the awarding body where it's marked. That's pass or fail. And like I said, the English and Math and Digital, it might be that T-level panels require higher level skills for those, but they have to have a minimum of level 2 functional skills or the GCSE grade 4 or above to be able to get the T-level certificate. And then lastly, the other requirements, like I mentioned on the previous slide, might be something like a food hygiene certificate for the catering and hospitality T-level. So this is the guidance that we've been given. This has come from the Department for Education around the UCAS points. So you can see there, if a student achieves a distinction star, that is the equivalent to 3 grade A stars at A level. So it would give a total of 168 points, and you can see on that table how the breakdown is for the different grades that students achieve overall on the T level. So that is the YouTube video that I won't be able to show, but you'll be able to watch in your own time. And this has got a number of students being interviewed that completed industrial placement last year. So colleges at the moment are using funding from the Department for Education around what's called the Capacity for Delivery Fund. So this is money that we've been able to access to start developing the relationships with employers so that we can make sure we've got those relationships in place ready for when the T-levels come. So at the moment, we've got students going out trying to test to make sure that we can complete the 315 hours placement as part of the programs that the students are studying at the moment. And it's also enabling us to build those relationships with employers ready for when the T-levels come. So students on this video have been out on placement last year, and it's a really positive video. It's them basically talking about their experiences and how they felt that these industry placements are really valuable. So we've been using this as a tool, both promoting it to employers that we want to engage with and also to students that are potentially going to be T-level students in the future. So that brings me to the end of the information on T-levels, but I'm more than happy to open it up to any questions that I may be able to answer. So hopefully some of you may have some questions from that presentation, and I'll be able to give you the answers to them.
Okay, thanks very, very much, Ashley, for a really, really interesting presentation on a really topical issue at the moment that I think lots and lots of people have requested as a CPD topic. So thank you for that, first of all. As Ashley said, if there are any questions that people have got at the moment, do feel free to type them in the questions and comments box now, and I will pass them over to Ashley. There's actually quite a few coming through already, which is really good to see people engaging so well with the topic. If I start just with the first question, Ashley, that came through fairly early on in your presentation. So one question we've got from Laura is the 315 hours of placement, is that per year or is that overall? I think this might be in relation to the industrial placements that you were talking about, but if you can just clarify that, that would be great.
That is overall. So it can be done. So it's planned to be over the 2 years. Students have to complete the 315 hours.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. That hopefully answers that question really nicely. Another question we've got from Phil, who's asking, what can you say about how universities are talking about the value of T-levels in relation to higher education? So sort of as a different thing to the UCAS tariff.
So I'm not really clear on that question. So what?
Okay, so it's a question about how universities are talking about the value of T levels in relation to higher education. So I suppose the question is getting at, I think what I'm interpreting the question is getting at is how might T levels help a young person to progress onto higher education? And is there anything you can say, I suppose, from your side, more from the college perspective, but how you might present that to a young person?
Yes, I suppose really that the main thing about the T levels is they are meant to be preparing students for more technical degrees. If students are going to go on to higher education or higher apprenticeships, then in theory it should be the more technical degrees and the more and technical apprenticeships. So in theory, I would say that if, for example, a student wants to go on to study architecture or quantity surveying, then the construction T level should, in theory, prepare the students far more appropriately for that than doing 3A levels that might not cover any of the content. So it's about giving the students the relevant skills so they can move on to study at the next level, I suppose. I suppose that's the best way of answering that question, I think. And what we've been talking to students about is the fact that rather than doing 3A levels, go and study something that's going to actually give you skills that will be relevant to the degree that you're studying.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. And hopefully, Phil, hopefully that answers the question. If there's anything else that you wanted to kind of ask or check in relation to that, I suppose given Ashley's role within Havant and South Downs College, if there's anything further that you wanted Ashley to answer from the college perspective about how the college is speaking to young people about the value of T levels, then hopefully you can still see Ashley's email address on the screen. And Ashley said that people are welcome to get in touch if they have got questions. Equally, if it's more about how the universities and sort of higher education establishments are supporting young people to think about T levels, then that's perhaps a more suited question to the Sun to handle it from the higher education side. So the Sun email address was also on the screen, and you're very welcome to direct questions that way as well. Just moving on to another question that we have got from Steph. Steph's made reference to the work-based project that you talked about in the presentation. And she's asking, whose responsibility is it to support the young people with writing up their work in that work-based project? Is that, for instance, the employer or the college, or who might that be?
That's a good question. So at the moment, we haven't got the finalised assessment content from the awarding body. So we're due to get that in February for the first 3 T levels. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it will be marked externally. We know that. However, one of the expectations that are on colleges or providers that will be delivering the T levels is that students will be supported on placement. So we will have some kind of work-based assessor tutor role. So they will be the people visiting students. So potentially they will be the people helping students writing up the project. But I would also imagine that where the project is going to be chosen in tandem between the student and the employer, it needs to be a project that will benefit the employer in theory. So I'd imagine that some employers will want to engage with that and also be involved in the writing up of that, because hopefully it will be something that will benefit their organisation.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Thank you for that. We've got loads of questions coming through, which is really fantastic. So thank you so much to everyone for engaging really well. Luckily, we've got a fair bit of time as well. So so long as Ashley's happy to keep taking questions, we can definitely cover quite a few more of these. I'm summarising a few of them together because lots of people have asked questions around a similar theme. And that theme is about applications. So lots of people, we've got some questions about do young people need to apply, and if so, how do they apply, what sort of age do they need to be in order to apply for a T level?
Okay.
Yeah, anything you could talk us through there, Ashley, would be really great.
Okay, so at the moment, T levels are not currently funded for students over the age of 19. So it would only be students that would be coming to college on 16 to 19 study programs that would be able to apply to undertake T-levels. So that would be from the age of 16. So it would be students leaving school. And to apply for them, they would just need to apply to the colleges that have been selected to do so. So Havant and South Downs are one of only 50 colleges nationally that are able to deliver the first wave of T-levels, and that was selected based on a number of different parameters we had to apply to be able to offer them. So that was our Ofsted grade, the qualifications that we currently offer and the quality that we achieve with that, so the outcomes that we have for those qualifications. So we had to have certain percentage success rates and value added and so on and so forth to meet the criteria. So there are only certain colleges providing T-levels, but as long as your local college is a T-level provider, you just apply normally like you would do to do any other course at the college, either through, I'm assuming, a paper-based or web-based application. Does that answer the question?
Thanks, Ashley. I think so, yes. And as we said before, if any of you are finding that the answers kind of produce further questions for you, or that you've got more questions that come to you after the webinar, you are of course welcome, as we said, to get in touch via email. A couple of questions that can be linked together, which refer to the future of T-levels. One of them is a tricky one in relation to the current political climate, and how that, given the kind of current political uncertainty that we've got, is there any likely change that you're aware of to T-levels as a result of that? The other question, which links to that in relation to the future of T-levels, refers to the current university pathways into professions such as law and medicine, and is the person asking the question is asking, is the end goal to replace the current university pathways into those professions through T-levels? I don't know if you want to handle those two separate questions, Ashley.
Yeah. So if I handle the second question first, I would say no, because I think to go into to study law or to study medical practice, then that would still need to go via a university route. I think that certainly with the occupational specialisms that I've seen for the different T-levels that exist and the different pathways and routes, that there hasn't been anything around those areas. I'm assuming that it would still be an expectation that students would go on to study a degree at university to be able to get into those particular careers. And then the first question, sorry, was around.
So the first question was around the current political uncertainty that we're in at the moment, and the relation of that to T-levels.
So right from the start, we've been absolutely reassured that all of the political parties believe in T-levels. They were developed on the back of, like I said, the Sainsbury Report. The skills plan was agreed by all of the political parties because we do have a productivity problem nationally. We're way behind other countries in Europe, and this is quite well recognised by all of the political parties. So, like I said, we've been assured that that regardless of who's in Downing Street, we will still be ploughing ahead with T-levels, and that they will continue to be implemented. And the other thing I would say as well, there's been considerable amounts of funding that we've been able to access, which is quite unusual for FE. So, you know, the government has absolutely supported this. You know, we've got money for estates refurbishment. There's lots of money for CPD for staff going out into industry to develop the relevant skills themselves. We've got quite a lot of money that's supporting us to purchase the relevant equipment to be able to deliver the T-levels. So I'm convinced they're here to stay, because, you know, it's so rare that we get this amount of financial support to deliver something. So I think that the government are really keen on making this happen.
Okay, a few questions as well that link to funding for T-levels. I know this is an issue that you sort of touched on already.
Yeah.
One question which looks at what backup plans might be in place for students who are on a placement with an employer who may close down or who may lose funding. And then a couple of other questions as well that link to exactly where the funding comes from for the students' placements, and would that sort of funding and offer apply to students on an educational healthcare plan as well?
Okay, so there's a couple of interesting questions there. So firstly, in addition to the teaching hours funding that we receive for students studying T-levels, we also get an additional payment per learner to support them with the industrial placement. So that's where some of the funding comes from. In terms of students on EHCP, there's actually lots of colleges at the moment are testing how we support SEN learners on placement, and one of the models that we're testing is using job coaches. So we already have a supported internship program here at the college, and so we've expanded that. So we're using the job coaches to support SEN and some of our EHCP learners out on placement. And then there was one other question there at the beginning, wasn't there? What was that? Could you remind me, please, Nadia?
Yeah, so we had the questions that really the questions were generally about funding.
If a placement broke down, wasn't it? That was,
yeah, if an employer lost funding or closed down, yeah. Yeah,
so the employer wouldn't get the funding. The funding comes directly to us, and then we utilise that. But if an employer relationship broke down, or if an employer were no longer in existence, then obviously it would be on a requirement of the college to source a new placement for that learner. And that's part of what we're doing at the moment. We're building these relationships with employers so that we have got plenty of employers that are engaged with this and plenty of placements ready for when students start, because we don't know how many students we're going to be getting next year, for example, for early years education. So we need to make sure we've got sufficient placements in place ready for that. And I think part of the remit of those work-placed tutors will be to make sure that students' relationship with the employer is monitored while the student's out on placement, so that if there is something breaking down, that potentially we're ahead of the game and we can start sourcing new placements for students if it's required.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. A couple of questions in relation to the placement specifically as well, so kind of the more operational aspects of the placement and how the students themselves might feel about them. So some questions related to the fact that that placement is actually, it's quite a lot of study, there's lots of study hours combined with lots of placement hours. Is there any feedback from the students themselves yet on how they might feel about that, say in comparison to sitting an A-level?
Yeah, I mean, we have had, so like I said, we're testing students going on placement both last year and this year. We have had some feedback from students. I think the key is that, firstly, that the placement is really valuable, so that we're engaging with the employer, making sure that there's clear objectives for the students, that the employer knows exactly what technical skills the students need to develop while they're out in placement. But I think that part of it is making sure that we're getting the right communication right, both with the learner and the employer. And what I mean by that is for the student, it's basically a 2-year job interview. It's an opportunity for the student to sell themselves, to develop the relevant skills, so that hopefully, you know, either the student is able to get employment maybe with that employer, or definitely has the relevant skills to go out into the world of work in that particular sector. And then for the employer, I think that the key focus is around making sure that they can see that this is a talent pipeline for them. You know, we engage with lots of employers that say that we can't get the right talent, we can't get the students with the relevant skills. Well, this is the opportunity to make sure that is addressed. So students going out to an employer 1 day a week over 2 years, you know, that employer's got the chance to shape and mould and nurture that student into exactly what they want them to be. So hopefully, like I said, at the end of the programme, then they can maybe potentially move into employment with that employer.
And on a similar note, Ashley, if a student struggles to complete that 315 hours because they can't find a placement or for any other reasons, would they get any sort of qualification at all, or would that just register as a fail if that T-level?
That's a good question. So if it's because they've only, so firstly, I'm assuming this would be the case for most colleges, but it would be an expectation that we would source the placement, not the student. The student can do the placement at more than one employer. So the Department for Education have said that students can do up to two placements. So if there was a reason why a particular placement had broken down and we needed to move the student, they can do it with another employer. Students with special educational needs can do some of their 315 hours. So I believe it's 115 of the 315 hours. They can do them in an internal setting. So for example, if you've got a catering student and we wanted that some of their hours could be done in our college restaurant, for example. So there are some ways in which we can support the learner with the placement. But yes, going back to your part of your previous question, if the student doesn't complete the T-level, they will still get a certificate to show what they have achieved. So they'll get a certificate of achievement rather than a T-level certificate that will show what they have achieved on the 2-year programme, if there are aspects they have achieved and aspects that they haven't.
Great, thank you for clarifying. That's really clear, Ashley. Some questions about how T-levels fit in relation to other qualifications. So are you able to say anything more in relation to the relationship between a T-level, an NVQ and an apprenticeship? So how those things sort of coincide with each other and what the relationship might be between them?
Yeah, so the Department for Education has kind of badged T-levels as the mirror image of apprenticeships. Now, I know that's quite a sweeping generalisation, but we're basically saying that apprenticeships, if a student wants to do 4 days in work, 1 day in college, do an apprenticeship. But if you want to do 4 days in college, 1 day in work, do a T-level. So like I said, very, very simplified, but that's one of the ways that they're that's how they're identifying where the T-level fits in the current technical offer. In terms of MVQs, certainly as a college, we do very few MVQs now for 16 to 18-year-olds. We do more for adults. Obviously, under the old apprenticeship frameworks, there were lots of MVQs, but there seems to be less of them. In terms of where they fit with BTECs, like I said, if there's overlap between a T-level and a BTEC, then the BTECs in theory are going to be gradually phased out, or sorry, not just BTECs, other awarding bodies as well. So like CTECs and City and Guilds and so on and so forth, they would be gradually phased out while the T-levels are phased in. But we are currently going, so the Department for Education is going through a consultation review of level 2 and level 3 qualifications, and has asked all training providers and colleges and sixth form colleges and so on and so forth to comment on their views around what the current level 3 offer looks like, and what adds value, what doesn't, and what should continue to exist in the future. We're still waiting for the response from the Department for Education around that review, and there's a further review to come, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. There's lots and lots of questions, so I should say at this stage, firstly, thank you very much for all the questions. It's really good to see a topic with so much engagement from all of the different people attending. We have got time for a couple more. I will apologise at this stage if we don't have time to get to every single question. particularly in the case of multiple questions. I'm trying to do it as equitably as possible. We've got a question in relation to employers as opposed to the young people themselves. And what's the general employer reaction been to T-levels so far? Do the employers seem to feel suitably prepared and informed, or is there anything that you could say in relation to how the employers are prepared?
So the engagement we've had with employers has been really positive. I think, like I said, it's the way in which we have promoted and gone about communicating the benefits to the employers, because like I said, lots of employers are telling us they can't get the right talent. The students that are coming out of colleges don't have the relevant skills, and so this is in theory addressing that. So the engagement we've had has been really positive. The amount of employers that are prepared to take students on placement again has been really positive. So that's so from that perspective, I think it's great. However, I would say there are lots of employers that haven't heard of T-levels until we actually talk to them about it. So hopefully the national campaign after, I think it's PERDA, once that has that phase, and once we get a new government in place from December the 12th, the national campaign for T-levels hopefully will pick up, and we'll pick up a bit of traction and momentum, and hopefully we should start seeing more about T-levels over the next few sort of coming months. Was there another question in there, Nadia, or not?
I think you've tackled the major part of the question there, I think. A couple, I'm just sort of summarising multiple questions that have been asked in relation to pay. Apologies if this is something that you've answered in some capacity already, Ashley, but are you able to just talk at all about, is there any sort of, a bit like an apprenticeship, for instance, is there any sort of pay for the students, or does that not apply to T-levels at all?
So a number of employers that we've engaged with have said, can I pay the student? And we've said absolutely. So the government stance on this is, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So students can be paid to do the industry placement hours. And like I said, a number of employers that we've engaged with have asked if they can do that. So that's great. But no, it's not like an apprenticeship where the student is definitely paid. It's an option that the employers can undertake if they wish to do so.
Okay, fantastic. Just one question that picks up on something that was said in your presentation, which Liz has asked. So Liz has said that you mentioned funding being cut for other technical routes once T-levels are fully rolled out. Is there any clarification that you could add to that at all?
No. So yeah, so that is what we've been told initially from the SFA and the Department for Education. But like I said, I think a lot of it will hinge on this level 3 qualification review. So if lots of colleges that aren't delivering T-levels, for example, responded that they still feel that other level 3 offers in the same subject areas are really beneficial, and I believe that they are as well, because they do really help with social mobility. They help definitely getting students onto HE. We offer a large amount of level 3 BTECs, particularly at the moment, and they're fantastic for allowing students to access university. So I think if a lot of the response identifies that everyone feels the same way, then the Department for Education may well backtrack on their original plans. And obviously it's a bit of a probably a little bit of a political hot potato as well, because some of the awarding bodies have thousands and thousands of students that they put through these qualifications. So to then say that these qualifications no longer receive funding, then it might be a little bit challenging. But yeah, that was what, from attending initial T-level events. That was what the Department for Education planned to start with, but whether that comes to fruition or not, I don't know.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. As I said, because there are multiple questions that have been asked, is there any one particular site or anywhere in particular that you'd suggest that anybody with questions or uncertainties about T-levels might be best placed to look?
So there is, if you go onto the gov.uk site, there is a T-level document on there that I mean, I could probably send you a link that you could send out to people that gives an overview of T-levels and may answer some questions. But like I said, you know, if anyone wants to email me particular questions, I'm more than happy to respond. Or I don't know whether it would be appropriate or not, but you know, I don't mind people having my contact number and potentially giving me a ring, and I can see if I can answer those questions over the phone as well, potentially. I don't mind.
That's really helpful, thank you. So hopefully all of you at the moment are able to still see those email addresses there. It might be a good idea, if you've not yet done so, if you want to make a note of them. If you've got any questions that you feel you want to go directly to Ashley to, you've got Ashley's email address there. Equally, if there's any questions that you feel are better placed to somebody within Sun, or if you want to get in touch with Ashley via Sun, then of course we can do so with the second email address there. Okay, thank you very much, Ashley. If I sort of take over for the moment in terms of the evaluation, you shouldn't need to hand the screen back to me, but it might just be with the microphone button. You might want to just kind of give yourself a breather there.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much again. So just before we get to the end, if I can just ask you to feed back to us on our 3 very short evaluation questions, that would be hugely appreciated. If you can just hang around for another minute or 2. So I will launch the first question, which you should see on your screen in just a moment. Okay, so the question should be up on the screen if you're able to just answer that honestly. Okay, thank you for that. The second question should now be showing. And the final question, which does relate directly to one of Ashley's slides, has just launched now. Please obviously bear in mind that we will be circulating the slides to you post-webinar. So if you can't remember off the top of your head, that is obviously absolutely fine. Okay, great. Thank you very much to all those of you who selected one of the multiple choice answers there. That's really, really helpful in informing our future webinars and helping us to get a sense of what you thought of the webinar. So thank you for that. Okay, thank you very much to Ashley again for delivering such an interesting webinar, which has generated such an interesting discussion and so many questions, which is a really, really positive thing to see, and I think goes to show perhaps in many respects that there's quite a lot of confusion and uncertainty associated with T-levels, but also how topical and interesting and engaging a topic it is. So thank you very much, Ashley, both for your presentation and for responding to those questions. To all of you who've tuned in today, apologies if we didn't get to one of your questions. As we've said, you are welcome to email them over and we can address them that way. But thank you very much to everybody for tuning in and for giving up part of your Tuesday afternoon and evening to take part. And we hope that the information has been useful and interesting for you. Any questions at all, just get in touch, and the slides and the recording of the PowerPoint and the webinar will be circulated to you within a couple of days' time. So if you want to share that link with others who couldn't tune into the webinar today, then you're very welcome to, and that would be really great. So again, thank you for supporting the webinar programme, and we are going to close the programme in just a moment. So of course, from this moment onwards, feel free just to close down the browser. Thank you once again, and goodbye.